Hello and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada podcast. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman. On today's episode, we'll talk about the situation inside hospitals in Gaza. We have two separate interviews that we recorded over the past week. First, we'll speak with Dr. Majed Jaber, an emergency room physician we've interviewed before, who was working inside the European Gaza Hospital when it was bombed by Israel on May 13th in Khan Younis. Then, after Majed, we'll hear from Afeef Nessouli, who is a logistics coordinator with the medical solidarity organization Glia, about the humanitarian and medical catastrophe across Gaza. Here's my interview with Dr. Majed Jaber. Stay tuned for Afeef coming up. Hello and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada podcast. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman. I wanted to bring back Dr. Majed Jaber on to talk about the medical catastrophe in Gaza a few days after the Israeli army bombed both Nasser Medical Complex and the European Gaza Hospital in Khan Younis. Dr. Majed was working at the European hospital when it was attacked by Israel on May 13th, which they used bunker buster bombs and fire belts on the hospital and the surrounding areas. It was again attacked the next day, and the Palestinian Health Ministry says that it is now forced out of service. Dr. Majed Jaber, it's been way too long. Thank you for coming back on the Electronic Intifada podcast, and I'm so relieved that you're okay.
Thank you so much, Nora. I'm really glad that we survived the fire and bombing of the European Gaza Hospital. It's not the first time they bombed the hospital, but
Right.
sometimes just surviving, just a matter of sheer luck nowadays.
Well, tell us about what happened, where you were, what you were doing, and what it was like being inside the hospital when it was attacked with bunker busters and fire belts by the Israeli army.
Yeah, so before the bombing started, you need to keep in mind that there was a handover, a release of the American Israeli soldier, Aidan Alexander. And during this time, there was shifting periods of like huge drone surveillance, airstrikes just floating around, and periods of pure calm. And after the release was done, around that time we have the journalist that was targeted in Nasser Hospital, Hassan Slayeh, and in the in one of the rooms at Nasser Hospital, which was scary enough. And then a few hours later, the handover was done. And then we went back instantly to bombardments, to airstrikes, artillery shells. We already had people coming in and flooding the and with injuries, shrapnels to their stomachs, to their chests, their heads. I just felt like it was back to normal, but even worse. There's no breaks, non-stop violence, and after this very long night, so doctors were but naturally exhausted, and we wanted to just go back home. But while we were backpacking around the evening, 6 p.m. or so, we heard these horrifying sounds. Like it felt like an earthquake, deafening explosions, and we did not really what happened. It felt like, well, didn't feel like anything else before, really. The glass was shattering, the door were flying. We're talking about tiles, electricity lines just falling out of the roof. And when we went outside, it was filled with dust, debris, gas smell, the gunpowder, and we're just trying to process, to come to the realization that the European Gaza Hospital has just got bombed. And to keep in mind, the European Gaza Hospital was the last fully functioning hospital, was the last stand for the Ministry of Health and healthcare in general in Gaza. It was handling all the kind of burdens and dealing with these patients. And when we were trying to figure out what happened, we saw these huge craters at the yard of the ER, which also happens to be the entrance to the hospital. There's another entrance, which is next to a bus stop. also heavily targeted. About 3 airstrikes, and you have 2 airstrikes at the yard of the ER. There's also another airstrike in another place. It was next to an infrastructure facility. It handles telecom, the sewage, the water. So this was all damaged at the same time. And we saw people hanging up trees from the effects of the explosion. I know, like, it was popular. I know everyone who's gonna watch this saw the CCTV footage of the airstrike just bombing the earth. It went down and then created this mass explosion, and then everyone just was sent flying away. And sadly, some other explosions at the same time buried some people 6 feet under, and we still are not able to grab them, really. And what made it worse for us is that anyone who tried to help was targeted by drones, was targeted by these quadcopters that really come really close and with no warning. Any first responders were shot. A lot of these people were injured, and it added to the injury. Not to add the airstrikes that were also close to the entrance. The street that leads to the gate of the European Gaza Hospital was bombarded by multiple airstrikes to prevent anyone from coming in to help. Let alone it was a very active and crowded area. A lot of people have these, they're selling what remains of the canned food, trying to, um, well, figure out everything. You have this residential area next to European Gaza Hospital that is still trying to function. It's like one of the last functioning areas in Gaza next to the Balah that wasn't like fully invaded and destroyed. So the amount of casualties we've witnessed was immense, and trying to deal with the shock psychologically and try to figure out what to do next, because the ER department was also damaged from the effects of the explosion. Trying to pull the casualties was already a struggle because of the drones and the people getting shot and screaming, the children looking for their parents, the parents looking for their children. The doctors and the other healthcare staff were trying to figure out who got injured or not. So it was total chaos, really. From that point, we tried to resuscitate many patients, many injured people, and sadly, in many cases, we weren't successful. We lost a lot of them. We tried to contact the international community, mainly the ICC, because it was at European Gaza Hospital when it happened. The NORWAC, it's called, the Norwegian Aid Committee was there, and we tried to figure out what's going on. And we were notified that the Israelis do not want anyone to move outside of the hospital for more than 1 hour. And that's also a death sentence for anyone injured that needed urgent help. And some people tried to bravely do it, but they also got shot, sadly. And this chaos stayed for like 5-6 hours that night. About 9 airstrikes that kept on going, because the first one was like 6 airstrikes, and then like 3 happened after that. And we spent the whole night trying to measure the distance and like the kind of action that we need to do with all the pressure going on. We lost some patients through the night. Medical staff, some of them were fleeing. The patients were leaving the hospital. We're talking about sceneries of patients with broken bones, with injuries to their heads, that even if they're slightly conscious, they try to leave or have their companions to push their beds outside the hospital out of fear, even though there's a risk in staying and risk in leaving. We spent the whole night trying to figure out or to facilitate a way for the ambulances to at least evacuate the patients, because it's not really a safe place anymore. And we were successful, but just a tiny bit. And the international community also notified us that this event has ended and there's no fear. But sadly, that wasn't the truth, because the next morning it seemed all right until about 10, 11 a.m., where one of the bulldozers that were trying to repair the craters caused by the airstrikes got shot by a quadcopter, and the driver was wounded, and some other people were wounded by airstrikes in the residential area next to European Hospital. And from that point, the Ministry of Health decided that infrastructure of the hospital was completely compromised. We cannot provide care. People are afraid or cannot reach the hospital anymore. They're bombing closely and closely and closely, and there is the risk of them invading the hospital by land because it's very close to the new Muraj border, which is like about 700 meters away from European Gaza Hospital. And we spent just trying to evacuate as much patients as we could. We only had some ICU patients and some patients with cancer, with tumors, staying for the night. But yesterday, the evacuation was complete, and officially now European Gaza Hospital is out of service for many reasons, the risk as well as the infrastructure damage.
I mean, where are these patients being evacuated to? You know, Nasser Hospital was bombed on the same day, on May 13th, which is also in Khan Younis. North Gaza is completely besieged by Israeli forces, and all of the hospitals are either out of service or inaccessible. Um, what happens to these patients who are in need of just basic care and have to be placed elsewhere?
Well, some of the patients were transferred to Nasser Hospital mainly, or Al-Aqsa Hospital. Those are mainly the critical patients that need to be put on ventilators, these monitoring machines that need to be continuously functioning to let them breathe a little bit at least. And we're talking about heavily critically ill patients with injuries to their head, injuries to their chest. They're continuously either bleeding or have an infection, or their brain is completely damaged that they cannot breathe anymore. And so, to make them live, you need a ventilator working. But sadly, the ICU at European was the best ICU department, Gaza, and Al Aqsa Hospital is already busy and flooded with cases. Same with Nasser, and the doctors had to make decisions, to either try to discharge some patients who also need very dire help, but it comes down to priority and the, let's say, how possible it is for patients to benefit from care at the ICUs, and it was really difficult. Um, but this is sadly the nature of our work here as healthcare workers, is that we need to make difficult decisions. Some patients didn't find any place at all, and some of them decided to leave on their own will, like on at their own peril, because they're afraid for their lives, and that's understandable. And what we try to do for them is basically provide them with the medications that they needed and guided them through what can be done on their own, when to go back to any near healthcare facility. But honestly, it's not enough. We're talking about patients who needed chemotherapy with cancer, and the only oncology department that is functional in Gaza is at European Gaza Hospital. And mind you, the situation was bad already because we lacked about 70% of the stock needed to treat these cancer patients, at least a little bit. We don't have the radiation, we don't have the surgeries, but we had some drugs to keep them barely alive until they get transferred abroad. So that was a death wish for these cancer patients. That was a death wish for these critically ill patients. And it's gonna be a death wish for any patient who needed to stay a little bit more at the hospital to figure out how we can manage them. They fled out of fear, or they have no other place to go to.
And just in the past week, the Ministry of Health in Gaza said that I believe 40% of all medications are at zero stock. And that's just basic medication. I mean, what does it look like in an emergency room right now where basic medications that you rely on to keep people alive, to heal wounds, to treat cancer, to repair broken limbs, are unavailable, are just completely gone. What does that look like in the ER, and how does that feel as a doctor, as someone who has dedicated their life to helping people?
Well, the ER department feels like a drought nowadays. In cases of patients who needed, let's say a simple suturing and trying to remove the shrapnels, the superficial ones, we're facing a devastating difficulty trying to find specialized surgical tools. The autoclaves are not functioning well, and if there is any, the surgical tools are starting to go bad. They need to be replaced. They get blunt, they get rusted. The sutures, a lot of them are not fit for human consumption. We're talking about sutures that are designed to close dead animal bodies, etc. And when you go deeper, we don't have many catheters, no cannulas. We don't have the right sizes, or they're expired and they're not functioning that well. We're talking about a little bit deeper, the devices that we need, like an ECG for heart monitoring. We're talking about ultrasounds to see if there is any bleeding instantly during times of trauma. Those are not also functioning well, and they need a lot of maintenance. We even struggle to measure blood pressure nowadays because either the cuff or the monitor or something in between is not working very well. And it is just not that, you know, when you struggle to find these basic tools, it really seeps frustration into anyone who works in the ER department. The official numbers are very devastating. Let's say someone had developed a heart attack or a clot in their heart or anywhere else. We are at 99% shortage of these items. Someone has a heart attack, we cannot save them anymore. Even simple as that. Not even because of the mass casualties and the bombing. As you said, orthopedic, um, surgical, anyone who needs a lot of screws to fix to fix the bones, we can't do that anymore. We're leaving them to heal in a very poor shape, and maybe in the future, maybe we'll be able to make them go through the painful process of breaking their bones again and fixing them, and it will not be optimal. Same thing for chemotherapy patients. Same thing for even pills of paracetamol. We struggle to find these anymore. So you can imagine that you cannot treat a child with fever. You can't give them paracetamol, or you can't give them an antibiotic. So you can imagine how frustrating it is to deal with people with mass casualties, people with their bowels just eviscerated, their skulls fractured, and you're just looking. You know what to do, you know how to do it, but means are non existent anyway.
And compounded with the bodily injuries and the harm that Israel inflicts with every airstrike and drone attack and tank shelling and sniper attacks are is also now almost 3 months of starvation, of an engineered starvation policy, because all of the crossings have been closed. Um, what what kinds of effects are you seeing as a doctor, in your patients, but also on, on yourself, as you try to work on people, and both the doctor and the patient are suffering from starvation and lack of proper nutrition and clean water. What kind of effect does that have on, kind of the entire body system?
Well, to paint a picture for everyone, I know most of you have gone through some kind of a diet. They tried to lose weight and they had decided to eat less. But if you really eat barely anything, you're gonna start feeling the effects in a day or two. You're gonna start feeling cranky. You don't have it anywhere. Well, of course you're gonna lose weight, but you're not gonna be happy about it. And sadly, this is happening here in Gaza. Since the so-called ceasefire, has ended recently, we didn't see much food at all. The amount of vegetables, fruits, the necessary formulas for critically ill patients are non-existent because there was barely any food entering Gaza. People are starving, were starving, and they had some month of partial relief, and then we came back to it again. Let's paint a picture of someone with celiac disease, gluten insensitivity, someone who cannot ingest proper flour without having nasty complications. Their bowels just cannot deal with it. They lose a lot of their cells, a lot of their protein. They get into infections and they lose weight very, very rapidly. And they need some kind of a gluten free diet. And well, that's a luxury. That's something that not anyone in Gaza with celiac disease can afford, sadly. We had many celiac patients suffering from all the starvation more than the average person in Gaza because they cannot just eat anything. We eat canned foods, we eat flour that has gone bad and it tastes really bad, but that's all what we have. But these patients cannot survive on it normally. Sadly, we had a patient who had celiac disease that ingested and tried to eat bread because she was just hungry. That's what she said. We asked her why do this. She said we don't have any more food anymore. And sadly, she developed many bad complications because we first lack any parenteral formulas. Basically, these we the like pure protein, sugar, and fats given through an IV insulin through a cannula to their bloodstream. We don't have that, and they're very expensive. And we don't have any other alternative. Eventually, this patient developed enough complications that she ended up in the ICU. She wasn't even able to breathe anymore because she lost all her muscle, and eventually she sadly succumbed. And that's not like a unique case or just something that is selected. No, this happens every time. We have children that don't have any kind of rare illness or some congenital disorder, and they die on daily basis, and you can't pick it up, sadly. And for the average person, since you don't have much food, speaking of myself, I eat on average a day about 500 calories. Some days spend without eating anything, and it's just it's really difficult to function and focus when your brain is very concerned about the hunger that is going on. the lack of nutrients, the vitamins, the protein, the fats, etc. It cannot fuel itself anymore. People are losing muscles. They're just basically skin on bone. I don't know what's left anymore of their own body, let alone their sanity. As doctors, we notice that we can be very sluggish and very slow, and we try to push it to the limit, but there is a limit to the human body. To not be able to even meet the bare minimum, that you eat some canned beans or some rice that gone bad and still feel hungry, that you crave more food, is a very difficult experience. And now you can imagine what these patients who are already sick feel. When you're sick, you need more calories. When you're sick, you need more care. And we can't provide medical care, and you can't even simply eat.
Um, Dr. Majed, last night we're recording on Friday, May 16th, and last night, overnight, on the it was Nakba Day on May 15th, the commemoration of now 77 years of genocide and ethnic cleansing, and last night's attacks by Israel, especially on northern Gaza and Beit Lahia and Jabalia, were people were saying it was some of the worst attacks ever in the 18 months of this genocide. Um, can you talk a little bit about how your colleagues in northern Gaza are doing? I mean, it seems like the Indonesian hospital is now the only partially not barely functioning hospital in the north, and the influx of dead and injured over the last 24, 48 hours has been unprecedented. um, do you have any information about what's happening in the north and what your colleagues there are saying?
Yeah. So what has been going on at the north is very systematic. It's just we've seen some Israelis, special soldiers, just feeling proud about repeating the Nakba again, etc. Um, so my colleagues in the north are facing many layers of the genocide at the same time. First, you're dealing with casualties, mass casualties, people being displaced for God knows the 10th time now. They lost all their livelihoods, they've lost many of their family relatives, their houses were barely standing, and now they're forced to leave again. And of these people are the doctors who are staying there. So I had a colleague who lost their, it was a family member, I don't know exactly who. And I had another doctor who lost his mother-in-law and his brothers-in-law, and his mom was severely injured in an attack. And the stories are going on. We have another med student who got injured and her family was also injured, and her house was destroyed. And the Indonesian hospital was barely functioning during the ceasefire, even before, even after. It's very close to the borders, and the UN and the Ministry of Health is struggling to make it work back again. And even if it was partially working, it was depending on like a very limited medical staff, barely any doctors, and we had to seek help from the international community, to foreign doctors coming here to Gaza to help, and they were really very helpful at times, but it's very limited. Really, we couldn't conduct many difficult surgeries at all, and we even had to rely on med students to provide care. For once it happened, many of the doctors who were around Indonesian hospital decided to flee to the south, not the south, like the Gaza itself, and they're trying to build their own tents, trying to find a place to stay. They tried to work at the Shifa hospital, but now at the Shifa hospital itself is just a red zone. They're threatening to target a Shifa hospital as well as the other universities in Gaza, and it doesn't seem to have an end, kind of thing. We've been through this cycle over and over of, let's say, fake promises from the international community that this may lead to an end. We're going through the Nakba with people being killed and massacred, um, being utterly displaced, and even the intensity of the bombing increased. And now we have the Israeli army calling it the Gideon wagons or whatever, trying to imitate a fable that we are the bad guys and they're here to just kick us and destroy us. And well, the genocide just keeps going on no matter what. And the ethnic cleansing has been sadly somehow being used to, if you know what I mean. I'm happy and I'm glad that some international people trying to speak up against what's going on. And speaking up is the first step. But we don't have much time anymore. Um, they're talking about displacing everyone from the north to the south, and the south doesn't have any infrastructure or any help. And we don't want to be displaced. We're native to this land. We want to stay here in Gaza. We don't want to leave anywhere. And yet, we feel helpless, let's say.
I'm gonna let you go because your time is precious, and I know it's already been a long day, and you know your work is so necessary and needed, and I'm so grateful. I know that our audience is always so grateful to hear from you and for the work that you continue to do under such unbearable, unspeakable conditions. And yeah, if people want to follow you, you're on Instagram at Medicine Citizen. You're frequently posting really beautiful and upsetting updates about daily life as a doctor in Gaza. And so we'll put a link up in the written post that accompanies this. But please, I know I always say this, but please be safe as much as possible. You are, you're just very precious, and I'm so grateful for you as always, Dr. Majed Jaber. Please be safe, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Yeah, sounds perfect. Take care.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
As Dr. Majed said, early in the morning on May 13th, an Israeli drone strike targeted Nasser Medical Complex in Khan Younis, yet again hitting the burn unit and killing 2 patients in their beds, one of whom was the journalist Hassan Asleya, who is recovering from a previous assassination attempt. 12 people were injured in the attack, and 18 hospital beds in the surgical department, 8 beds in the ICU, and 10 inpatient beds were destroyed, according to medical sources. Just hours later, the Israeli military heavily bombed the European Gaza Hospital, also in Khan Younis. Meanwhile, the humanitarian situation is in a free-fall catastrophe. Since March 2nd, Israel has closed all the crossings, preventing humanitarian aid, food, fuel, medicine, basic supplies, and other essentials from entering Gaza, plunging 2 million people into engineered starvation. I spoke with Afeef Nessouli, who is on the ground in Gaza, working as a healthcare logistics coordinator with Glia, a medical solidarity organization. Here's that interview that we recorded just hours after Israel bombed the Nasser Medical Complex and the European Gaza Hospital on May 13th. Afeef, it's so good to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really am honored and I appreciate it.
Oh, it's our honor. Well, it's about 9 p.m. in Gaza right now while we're talking and recording, and Israel has bombed two separate hospitals already today. What can you say about the attack on Nasser, which was an assassination of Hassan Aslea, and the attack on the European Gaza Hospital? What do you know, and what are your reactions to these bombings?
I think it's so interesting as you were reading that intro, I realized that that had happened earlier today and it felt like a whole other chapter of I guess this day, right? I woke up this morning and late into the night had realized he had been assassinated. This extremely well-known journalist in Gaza, really respected. My feed and my friends were mourning, really. There was a lot of really sad people, a lot of pictures with him, a lot of memories, and a lot of love. So I think from my perspective, it was like a friend of a friend that died, which was interesting because, there's a lot of people that we now know, thankfully, from Gaza who have done extremely good at reporting the facts and getting us the story. And just experiencing it from within Gaza and understanding how much he meant to so many people that mean a lot to me was really hard. And then now, just a few hours ago, EGH was bombed, and it feels like the number of strikes is I'm not sure if it was 10 or 15 or less, but I know that at the main gate there were several, and mostly it was just awful footage coming out and hearing, I don't want to say exactly where I am, but I'm in southern Gaza and frequent these different areas for medical logistics, which basically we can get into later. But it's just my first instinct was to call the people I know again that are doctors there that are definitely there and working. And I had a conversation with a friend, and I think a friend that we both know and love a lot, Dr. Majed, and he was there, and he had experienced, just he was just I think he was in a really dangerous spot like 15 minutes prior, and I mean, narrowly missed it. It's just so traumatizing. Like these doctors are seeing so much all the time. So just this one day has been, it seems like it's getting worse before it gets better. Like that's how I'll
Yeah.
end this because it just feels like today was particularly bad. And it's particularly noisy right now. And it's getting just some nights are really noisy and some nights are noisy, but not as noisy.
Yeah. And what kind of noisiness? Can you describe it?
Yeah, there's several kinds. There's big booms, like kabooms that are big strikes from the air. More likely than not, that was what happened at EGH. So it's just and there are several, so it's like extremely loud. There's quadcopters in the air, and there's like a you're like drenched in a humming buzz. But then there's also like the different it's crazy because you start to literally think about what it is. There's an F-16, there's an Apache, there's a quadcopter, there's different kinds of sounds, and I'm definitely not nearly as well versed on these kinds of things as my friends in Gaza who have been here for either their whole lives or just have been here for a lot longer than I have. um, it's just horrifying to have to like know those different sounds.
Yeah.
It's just terrible.
Yeah. Afeef, you spent over a month, nearly 2 months now, documenting the work that you're doing and the work that your colleagues are doing on the ground in Gaza. You're also documenting kind of, snapshots of daily life, what it's like trying to find food amidst this engineered starvation, famine. Can you talk a little bit about what it, the what strikes you the most about people's daily lives, trying to just live, trying to feed their kids, trying to, find the right medications? What is what is it like right now? 2 months, almost 3 months into this, into the closures, uh, and these attacks that are just incessant and getting worse.
Yeah, the fact that the crossings have been closed since early March has put this moment in Gaza, as for some people, and I think many people agree, but I wouldn't say everyone says this, it's nearly the worst it's ever been because people are the hungriest they've been. Um, People are eating rice off the floor or molded breads. And this isn't everybody, right? Every place is stratified and there are different people having different experiences, but the crossing has been closed for over 70 days at this point. So it doesn't really matter where you sit in society. You're like extremely limited. Like I probably as a humanitarian aid worker have a lot of access to like just a lot more than most people who live here regularly. And I'm having a lot of like 80% of my meals are just like once a day and they're rice and tuna or like pasta and tuna or some canned good. And it's hard because you also see people crowding with pans and pots and they're just waiting to get some aid or some ration of some aid from a time before. You go to the market and there's a lot of tomatoes and there are some fresh produce from the land, but a lot of the farmland has been destroyed, so it's not that much. Um, you just kind of have you just look around and you're just like, this is really, really empty. There's a lot of goods here, but none of them are food. There's a lot of like toys or random things that like, are just merchandise that nobody needs right now. And there was falafel at one point. There is still, but things have got really chaotic where fuel was about to be completely out, and then UNOPS got like 1 million liters. So for a while, it's been the worst it's been because water desalination plants need fuel, hospitals need fuel, ambulances need fuel. I need fuel to literally do logistics by just driving a car. Um, Heating your food. Like there's just so many things that at this point is just unnecessary as an entire concept. Like people are struggling in ways that it doesn't seem like it's obviously inhumane and it's obviously perverse, but it also just doesn't seem any way logical. Like it doesn't like there's no I can't understand. You seeing it this close, you're like, I just don't understand how it could ever be this way or get
Yeah.
this way and for what reason? Because we already know, but seeing it also makes you just disbelieve the things you're being told or the things that you've heard people really believe, you know?
Yeah. 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 The depths of the depravity of the
Yeah.
Israeli military and government
Hmm.
is really it's unspeakable. Well, tell us about your work as a medical logistics coordinator and the people that you're working with inside these hospitals. What kind of medicine these doctors and nurses are able to practice under these conditions, and what it looks like to coordinate and set up logistics in
Sure.
this environment.
So I came with Glia, which is a Palestinian run and Palestinian and Canadian run organization, and it brings in delegates that are international, that are usually nurses or doctors or people like me who can sort of manage the situation that we're trying to have happen, which means these delegates come, they get placed at different hospitals. It's usually like just by need or whatever is going on is always changing. So this hospital might need a maternity NICU nurse, and someone's come and we've there's some way that we've recruited someone who wants to come and has that skill set. And what I do is a lot of different things. This is sorry if you hear noise in the background. Always a bunch of people wherever I am because we're all sort of just like a unit of colleagues, basically.
Yeah.
Um, so they come and they're different doctors. There's trauma nurses, there's trauma doctors, there's surgeons, there's pediatric people, there's trauma nurses that are like immediate responder types. And then we have access to doctors in general because they have their colleagues. And so what I basically do is document them. And a lot of times for studies that we're going to do and just like understanding like the forms that I'm trying to collect are all about recording the amount of patients there are, what they had, what's going on with the circumstances, what kind of care they were able to get. And you get stories like there's not enough morphine for explosive injuries. There's a kid who's a baby who was beheaded. There's just awful, I mean, everything that we have already had to like understand this genocide has been like, it's they're at the front lines like seeing it, and we're taking some footage of it, and it's hard. Um, but they're such heroes. They're such incredible heroes because they're not. It's not just international people. It's the international people are just basically helping the heroic Palestinian doctors who are doing like we're literally here to support. So just trying in any way to like have some sort of any way to assuage anything is kind of the call. And so sometimes that means literally driving food to people. I don't know if you just heard that, but that was a very close bomb. It was really. Um, Sometimes it means just taking in form. Sometimes it means making videos of them. Sometimes it means doing work with other NGOs that are healthcare, sort of by like water distributors or orphanages or um, prosthetics places, teachers that are. There's such a it's a place that isn't large, and there's a lot of need, and we're all just trying to help each other do whatever is possible. And a lot of times, the fact is that there's limited resources, limited fuel, and you can't do a lot of stuff. So we end up being in each other's faces all the time and finding joy in just like talking and having as much playing whatever we can do to just hang out. Um, and so it's both extremely horrifying, but there is this incredible depth and incredible understanding of like life itself in a way that I can't say is it's just not typical for my experience in this life. And it's it's truly knowing feelings like they are
Yeah.
exposed to so much, that they know exactly what love is and exactly what incredible mourning is. And this is not from me. It's not my this is someone told me this is exactly how he feels about being Palestinian, is just, and specifically from Gaza, is just you've lived through so much that you have every feeling, every feeling, how you can feel that way. And so you just grab on to the good feelings and the thankfulness and the faithfulness when you literally just can, because there's other times you're just going to be mourning and hungry and all these other feelings.
Mm. And you mentioned documenting the work of these Palestinian doctors and nurses. And one of the most recent social media posts that you posted was of you and your colleague Zahid Rahman, who we actually had on the live stream a couple of months ago when he was working in Gaza. And you profiled a nurse, Saeed, at Al Aqsa Hospital, who was tortured by Israeli soldiers at Sidi Tayman torture camp. And you captioned that post, which we'll play in a moment. You said, quote, "Some of my work with Glia consists of recording the effects of Israeli torture on Palestinians' psychosocial health, especially when they are afforded no time to process the experience. The truth is, Nurse Saeed went from an Israeli torture prison directly into a genocide, which has now developed into a famine." And let's play a few minutes of that clip.
Saeed is 27 years old, and while he allowed us to record his voice, he wanted to stay off camera. He's been a nurse at different hospitals like Al Shifa or Al Aqsa in the burn units and the vascular departments. While the genocide has been incredibly hard for most medical staff, there was a specific group of Palestinian healthcare workers who were taken by the Israeli military from Gaza between November and December in 2023, and they were detained without charge for months. Saeed was one of them. Nurse Saeed was taken hostage and held at Sidi Tayman prison in Israel. He endured incredible abuse, and therefore psychological trauma. Much of my work with Glia while I'm in Gaza is documenting testimony of the psychological impacts of this genocide for Palestinian victims. Part of that is working with my fellow volunteers to record important stories and experiences when they hear them. So last month, and a fellow volunteer with Glia was working with Nurse Saeed at Al Aqsa. He recorded this conversation between he and Nurse Saeed about what happened to the nurse.
Assalamu alaikum. Today is Saturday, April 19th. I'm at Aqsa ER and I'm speaking with Nurse Saeed.
Nurse Saeed says for about 60 days he never saw a lawyer or was charged with any crime. While he was held in the infamous Israeli torture prison, he told Israelis that he had nothing to do with Hamas, and that he believes that they had just taken him and the entire medical staff arbitrarily. Nur Said, along with his colleagues, made international news a few months later. They had experienced unimaginable torture. Because Nur Said has had little time to process his experience, as he was released into an intense genocide and famine in Gaza, he explains that it's helpful to record this. It is important for him to talk about what happened, because he wants to send a message to the entire world.
It's not like a comfortable thing and talk about that, because I want to send a message for everyone who can listen to this message. It's like one day they put an instrument like metal instrument. That's one day, not every day. They took me into a military investigation. At the military investigation, they put a metal instrument at my sexual organs. Then they took it with a strong way. Then you imagine how the pain is. That's one day at the military investigation. I've been a military investigation for 5 days.
What do you think was the purpose of them abusing you with metal rods?
I didn't think about anything, but
Did they tell you why?
No. They hate us just like from the hate. Everything is from the hate, coming from the hate, and they show us to people like we being detained and like a terrorist. They talk to.
I mean, it's words fail me, and when Nur Said is describing the kind of torture that he endured, knowing that it was not an anomaly, that this is a systematic policy of torture and abuse, humiliation of doctors and nurses and teachers and lawyers, and can you talk about how you when talking to healthcare workers and medical experts and people who have taken oaths to care for one another, what is that kind of torture meant to do to healthcare workers, and how are the people that you are working with able to transcend that abuse and terror, if that's possible at all?
I think first, it feels like it's meant to psychologically break people. I think there's a lot of Gaza is a place that has a lot of mores that revolve around faithfulness and Islam, and a lot of ways in which the population is pious. And so the idea of sexual assault with dogs, which comes later in the tape, the idea of just violation in the genitalia is such a assault. I mean, of course, I'm saying words that we know, but it's such a attack on the psyche of a Muslim man, in my perspective, because I am one. Um, and it feels like it's particularized, and it's not only it's just it's a targeted sort of humiliation that will stay with people for a long time. But the problem is, as I explained, is that they're forced to come into places, they're forced to come into a genocide that is turned into forced starvation, and they've had no time to like think about these things until you hear about them through a conversation with them, or you ask a question that sort of spurs a thing, and then you get to talking, and they realize it's helpful, and then they realize also that they've done it because they think it's important, but nobody's really, most of their time they're just being doctors. They don't have time for processing right now. They're in trauma, and that trauma just was one trauma going into others. So he told me that he's just very thankful. He told us well, he told Zahed that he thinks that he's very thankful, and that he also just he hasn't processed it, and that's not what's happened yet. But he believes in God, and he knows uh, just how to hold on to the very like tenets of faithfulness in his religion that help him feel steadfast in the face of such horror. And I think that that's very normal here. That's typical. That's everybody saying Alhamdulillah through every sort of sentence, it's woven into everything that they say. Every greeting and every goodbye is caked with like blessings and, calling upon God to protect. And I do think that that is a bit of a system of like really therapeutic, even just in the essence of Arabic itself. It's like it's like super understated. I think that it it's all about having gratefulness for what is right now, because it's going to literally help you understand with clarity what is real and what's not real, and to just hold on, because all of this is just some test, and you don't have to understand it. It's not a good test, it's an awful test. Nobody's thankful for this test, but the singular thing I've really been blown away by is by everybody's steadfast belief that there is a greater story here, and there is a reason, and they have been assigned an incredible test of humanity that they have to just sort of bear and understand and be patient, sabr. So it's been really interesting and hard to be part of, but also hard to be separate from as well, because I am not a Palestinian Gazan. I'm Lebanese American, and it's just sort of a witnessing. And I think a lot of the things that we're giving, actually, because I think Palestinians are extremely capable of doing all of the things we're doing. The journalists are really incredible. The doctors are incredible. I think what we're doing is giving them company from a place outside of Palestine that's like, hey, like whatever, like tell us what you need. We're here. And I think that's what I've heard from people, is that like actually like you can logistics all you want, but really just being in this room and talking a little shit and like just spending time together is particularly psychosocially helpful. And so a lot of these stories that I'm talking about are trauma, and testimony giving is very obviously it's important for someone to in their processing stage, but a lot of times they want to say it out loud in one place so that it just is remembered, like for whatever it's worth, that it happened, and that they stand by this awful experience, because it's the only way. I think that there's no justice, but there is just some sort of like record.
Yeah. 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 That's what we all feel we're doing, outside of Gaza too, is we're helping to record and document.
Yeah.
And sometimes it feels very futile,
Mhm.
and wholly inadequate. But that's the work that we've been tasked as well.
Totally.
Afeef,
Absolutely.
you've also interviewed some civil defense rescue workers, and also doing incredibly heroic work that
Yeah.
that day in and day out, all of the fire trucks and heavy equipment vehicles have, most of them have been destroyed, burned by the Israeli military. How are civil defense workers, rescue workers, first responders doing their work today? What does that work look like?
Yeah, so these are the people that almost, I mean, for I have no better words, are like really delivering people to doctors, right? These are the guys that are like 25. I've talking to a couple 25-year-olds that have been there for 5 years already. And they say that during this experience has been harrowing, because first of all, a lot of times they're hungry and thirsty because there's limited resources. And they're the ones who are literally going. I talked to one guy who's 25. I don't want to give him too much attention, even though I did, and he doesn't care because he already did it as well. But his name is Abdullah, for all it's worth. And he's 25, and he is just such a hero. Like he is literally getting a call while he's at the civil defense headquarters and responding to a building that's just been blasted wherever it is with his like pack of guys that are all around his age that eat like once a day, and will share their food if you at all are there in any capacity. They're not going to like not let you eat some of whatever lebne or bread they have. And I mean, they see so much pain. They see people struggling for life and have to make really incredible decisions that I just can't fathom making, which are basically to figure out who's alive and help them first, and then figure out how much time they have to help people before another strike inevitably might come in the same area. So it's like a race against time, and they have to figure out who is good, well enough to like be someone to go to first. And a lot of times they're doing this without enough calories, like for sure. And they have all of these images over and over and over again. They have all of these images of people struggling, saving people. It all becomes the same, I think. I think, we like see it from social media and it's like heroic or so devastating. But I think what happens is there's an erosion of an erosion of what is even happening. You're just sort of mechanically going in, but the thing that makes them not mechanic at all is just their faith, because they're always spiritually super advanced. So you talk to these 25-year-olds and it's like you're talking to a wise guru who has lived a million lives, and he's saying what's true, and he's saying, listen, like, this is what someone has to do this, and we're a part of this group that just does it. This is our job, and I feel like I'm meant to do this job. And you can tell you're right, because this is not a job for most people. So you are one of the few who has like incredible bravery and also just like faithfulness and also just like capacity, because it's a lot of hard work and it's also a lot of emotional, it's like psychological torture. You're like really having to go into the most scary spot and try to save people's lives who are really hurt.
Yeah. Yeah. And the amount of rubble. I mean, after every explosion, you see, groups of civil defense workers, first responders, not just attending to the wounded or trying to retrieve the bodies or body parts of those who have been killed, but also trying to dig the rubble out with their bare hands.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
I mean,
I think some of them the most, I think, hard to imagine thing is trying to get to someone and using all of your muscles without enough calories and worrying about what's coming next and trying to get to that person in time.
yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, but you just
No,
sort of
no.
sure, yeah, it's like totally what I just had to say that.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's unfathomable, I think, to most people. Um, and and kind of, bringing it back to what you were talking about earlier in terms of, how people in Gaza are feeling every feeling at once.
Mhm.
You've also been documenting, kids playing on the beach and teachers trying to, teach kids in a
Mhm.
makeshift classroom, and people, buying trinkets at the market. What are some of the the experiences, the images, the sounds, the smells that you think will stay with you for the rest of your life after
Mm.
you return from Gaza?
I think the amount of people interacting actually, and the amount of fullness in the like air because of how much chatter there is, and just the kids always finding something to like climb and have a lot of fun with. And I think that we always talk about this, like the word resilience and why it's annoying versus like being extremely strong and having to be like, they feel like they're forced into this and they're just trying to live. Like they're really just trying to they're trying to keep up the energy to be alive. To The most resistant thing I can think of is like kids being taught and kids being, cared for. And that's what I've sort of gotten to do as a logistics person, is go into a lot of different areas, an orphanage with kids just doing kawaii, like grammar, and just trying to speak English to me, and having some prepared some sort of like sentence that is just super welcoming, and just playing and having fun and talking to me, and like that, like, teen girls, like just like badgering me, and like and asking me all that, like 100 questions, and wanting to know every detail. And it's just like so wonderful to remember that adults are actually weak. It's like the kids that are super capable of telling you exactly what's happening all the time with no shame, and they're also and no like sugar. You know what I mean? I think a lot of the older you get, especially in a place like Gaza, the more you're going to flower your language with like thankfulness and gratefulness and God and the capacity to keep going. But kids are going to tell you straight up, like, what the hell? What is going on? Why are they doing this? You know what I mean? And they're struggling beyond belief. And so I don't want to trivialize that. Everybody's struggling beyond belief. People have lost weight. People are eating once a day, if that at all. Um, but I will always remember that people have taught me that you need a lot less to be happy than what we even understand or fathom in the West, because they are as sad, and as much as they're mourning, they're also loving and laughing and trying to find space for life in ways that I think sometimes is just spiritually advanced. Like they're like past us in that way. Like we have so much excess, which they've had in some bubbles of their lives. Like it's not that like they've always been poor and blown up. That's like what I hate about trauma porn. It's that these are
Yeah.
regular middle class people a lot of times who have been occupied and can't leave and can't get whatever they want or get access to the things we normalize so much. But they created a society that was beautiful and strong. And I think that ultimately their capacity to like be not just strong, but really human and loving and like tender and like you like really community driven and like do the dishes and make the food and you know I don't know, do any of these things with happiness, with genuine joy, with genuine just I'm going to be really happy right now until I don't, I can't be. And that is such an incredible way to live that I hope that I really have memorized it.
It's beautiful. Afeef Nessouli, you are volunteering with Glia, the medical solidarity organization. You can find out more about Glia at glia.org. And your social media, you're on Twitter, X, as well as Instagram at Afeefness, Afeefness. Afeef, please take care of yourself and those around you. Give everyone just our utmost solidarity and respect. And it has been a total honor. Thank you so much for spending time with us today on the Electronic Intifada.
I appreciate you so much, and I'm honored to be here. And just thank you for connecting all the way to Gaza today.